Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hey, Carol. I'm Danielle. I'm executive editor here at Fine Gardening, and we have launched into the new year. We've already done our New Year's inaugural interview episode, thanks to Carol. That was such a great listen, Carol. I loved it. If you guys did not hear that, that's episode 150 with Stacy Cripps, an incredible garden designer that Carol did this so cool interview with. And I am feeling amped. I am feeling pumped. I am redoing my front bed this year, thanks to those design rules of thumb. Carol, that was fun.
Thank you. It was fun to do it. I love the interviews. I mean, who doesn't love to talk to a garden person, right? That really knows what they're doing. Lots of
right. You gave us access to get inside her head and really get that invaluable lessons learned aspect of things, but without having to hire Stacy. So that was great. I loved it. But we're back to our normal format for those listening. And what is our topic today, Carol?
Today, we're going to talk about underappreciated plants for winter interest.
Yes. So, winter's hard, guys. We have to come up with these topics of what we want to talk about. And frankly, sometimes we throw in something weird like, hey, let's talk about tropical plants and it's 0 degrees outside. But, underappreciated for winter, I think is a really cool topic to get into because everybody talks about winterberry, Ilex verticillata or red twig dogwood, but that is not these guys. The approach was, hey, unsung heroes of the winter garden. Did you have a hard time coming up with a list, Carol?
I did not. In fact, I think what I did was just narrow out the obvious choices, and I was still left with plenty of cool, interesting. I tried to find something quirky about each of my choices that made it underappreciated. I don't know. What did you do? How did you pick yours?
Oh, I like it. You know what? Honestly, we had finally some cold weather here this past week. So I took a wander around the garden and just, whatever jumped out at me. And I thought, oh, wow, I've never noticed you as being a winter interest plant before. And yeah, which also made finding the photos for the show notes a whole hell of a lot easier because I just took my cell phone with me. So, all right, tell me about your first quirky plant.
Well, so this one was a happy accident. I was thinking about this show. I was getting my plant list together. And, as one does, I sort of said, I maybe take a break and scroll through my social media. And I saw a post from our friend and a frequent contributor to the Garden Photo of the Day, Cherry Ong.
Yay,
our girl Cherry. Yay,
Shout out to Cherry.
in Vancouver. And she is gardening, basically inside the city limits of Vancouver. She has a very small garden space. And so she does a lot of containers. And she has plants that she keeps in containers year round. And she showed a picture of this awesome golden hemlock. It's Golden Duke Eastern Hemlock, and its botanical name is different than its commercial name. So it is Tsuga canadensis mongers, and it is hardy from zones 4 to 8. So this is a choice. You're supposed to go a couple zones more cold tolerant than you're in if you're putting something in a container. So that is not a problem for her being in Vancouver. I think they're zone 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
So she's able to keep this Eastern hemlock in a container year round. Although she did reveal to me that if they're getting an Arctic blast or something, she will bring these guys into the garage for a little extra protection, which is another benefit of growing in a container, right? Like if you were growing it in the ground, you would not be able to give it that kind of protection.
No.
But what's cool about this hemlock, the golden color, which is just very cool. And it stays that color all year round. But also it's a very slow grower. So eventually this plant will get maybe 6 to 10 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide, but it takes a long, long time to do it. So Cherry has had 2 of these in containers. She said about 4 years. She hasn't had to repot. She hasn't really had to do much for them except occasionally move them inside. They're not too demanding about the conditions they want. They like average to moist, well-drained soil. Again, very easy to do if you have it in a container. And a lot of the golden conifers really need to be in shade. But what makes Golden Duke different is that it can take full sun. So this is one that's happy full sun to partial shade. I love how delicate it looks. It's sort of feathery habit, a nice little thin tapering leader and these little sort of almost wispy branches. So it has that like great texture that a hemlock has, this amazing color, and you can grow it in a container. And this is one that I really hadn't heard of before. My research tells me that it is a sport of Golden Duchess, which is one that really needs shade. So I saw this and I said, ooh, okay, I don't really know this plant myself. I haven't grown it, but if Cherry's growing it and it looks so good, let's maybe talk about this one. Yeah.
It's worth a try.
Yeah.
So I have a question. It sounds like, especially because it's a good candidate for container growing, is this an extremely slow growth rate for a conifer? I mean, are we talking like an ultra dwarf, basically?
It's not an ultra dwarf, but it is slow growing, and it will take, I think, probably at least a decade to get to its full height. And again, it really doesn't get bigger than 10 feet tall. Now, you probably don't want a 10-foot tall conifer to still be in a container at that point in life. But it's not going to shoot up and have to be taken out of the container in a year or two. Like I said, Cherry's had hers in the containers for about 4 years. So
that's awesome. Yeah, because, especially being on the East Coast here, you think about, Eastern hemlock, Tsuga canadensis, we have monstrous trees around here that are just like, I'm thinking, all right, how big does this guy get and how fast is its growth habit? But yeah, that's so great to have those dwarf conifers, those like slow growing conifers. And man, if you want a focal point in your garden year round, choose a dwarf conifer, because I feel like I've got a couple. They're not inexpensive, but they are definitely eye-catching year round and worth the investment. So, all right, that's got to go on the list. So, all right, I'm going to match your native plant with another native plant, or a nativar with a native plant. And I was walking around, and this is a plant that is native to Eastern North America and Central Canada. And it's looking adorable right now in the woodland areas around my house. And it's something that has transplanted itself via rhizomes into some of the edges of my beds that I've just been tickled pink that it's done. And it's spotted wintergreen, and that's Chimaphila maculata. It's zones 4 to 8. As I said, it's got a pretty significant zonal range, for where it's native to. Zone 4, pretty awesome. It's a member of the wintergreen family. Now, admittedly, I have tried to grow wintergreen in my garden 2 or 3 times. And yeah, it has not gone well. I think wintergreen really does need a consistent moisture of its soil. And I don't have that, especially these past several summers. I'm not going to irrigate, and that puppy dries up and into a crispy little noodle. And that was the end of my wintergreen. But this plant is far more tolerant of said alternating conditions. It'll take average soil with a little bit of acidity to it, and it's a partial to full shade plant. Also, a ground covery size. So you're going to look at like about 6 to 8 inches tall and spreading up to about 14 to 18 inches wide. So this is kind of a matting ground cover, but not super aggressive. it's got the coolest leaves. Now, not very wintergreeny. It's actually long, lance-like leaves. And by long, I mean, 2 inches long with a little serrated edge to them, dark, dark green, almost looks black in the winter. Really turns to that almost the color. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the color of the shirt I'm wearing right now. It's a very dark green and it's got this beautiful stripe, this silver stripe down the center of it. Now, when I first noticed this plant years and years and years ago while hiking, I noticed it because it was in flower and it shoots up these probably 8-inch tall little stems with these nodding, waxy little bell-like pinkish white flowers in spring. And they're super fragrant. So you're hiking around, you're walking around and you smell them before you see them because this is, a dainty little petite plant. But then really you get a closer look and it's these world evergreen leaves that are just so spectacular and make like a really, really cool winter plant that's on the smaller side, so it's a little underappreciated. The thing that I love, and you'll see this in the show notes, is that this little plant decides to decorate itself for the holidays because those flowers give way to green berries that eventually turn bright red in the winter. So you've got this, this almost holly-like ground cover with these little red berries on it. And it's just like, I mean, come on, nature, you kick it. That is awesome that it just like decides to put on its winter best for the holidays. I researched a little bit more into this plant because it's just been something that I've taken for granted for so many years in my native environment. The genus name comes from the Greek word chimia, which is winter, and phelion, which means to love. So to love it in winter. I mean, plants are so cool. I love it. So, yeah, I've already mentioned that it spreads by rhizomes, but it's not anything that's really started to take over anything in my garden. It's playing very nicely right now with some epimediums and some hellebores. So really like this kind of nice little evergreen tapestry I've got going on. So again, that's spotted wintergreen, and I would highly recommend this amazing native plant for zones 4 to 8. All right, Carol, how about them apples? Now you off mic, you told me a little story about my spotted wintergreen.
Yeah, so I follow a native plants group that is, sort of local, and that plant, that wintergreen, comes up every winter and people find it in the woods and they think that it is something like a non-native invasive species that has invaded their woodland because it looks kind of exotic, right? It really looks like an ornamental that may have escaped cultivation. It's so cool when they find out that it's native.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had responded back. I'm like, yeah, it really does. It looks kind of like an osmanthus or something really, really weird that it should not be there. But yeah, crazy. All right. So how about them apples? You started with a woody. I started with a perennial. So it's Freaky Friday. What do you got next for us for underappreciated winter interest?
I have another woody, actually. So the strange pattern continues. This one is a plant that's in my borrowed landscape. So it's not on our property, but it is on the other side of the stream, the little brook that is our southern property boundary. And it took me a long time to figure out what this one was. So it is, I think, I'm 99.9% sure that it is American hornbeam, and that's Carpinus caroliniana. And it has a few common names. Some people call it blue beech because the leaves look kind of beech-like. I don't know where the blue comes from, but I guess the green in the summer is maybe a little bluish. And the other name that it often has is musselwood. And that's because it has this beautiful smooth bark that has, I guess it kind of looks like mussels underneath the bark, especially when the plant gets older. The one that's on the other side of the stream from me is not very old. It's quite a young plant. I would guess it's less than 10 years old. I've really only started noticing it in the past 4 or 5 years. And the thing that really caught my eye about it, and I've used this word before on the podcast, it has marquescence. So it holds onto its leaves after most of the deciduous trees around it have dropped their leaves. It will hold onto its leaves. In fact, holds onto its leaves throughout most of the winter. So it has these little, probably, inch long beech-like leaves, and they turn a beautiful sort of chestnut brown. So in contrast to the American beech, which is nearby, that sort of gets this blonde colored leaf, it's a darker leaf. And I think it's very pretty. I don't mind having a little extra brown in the landscape. And it jumps out against the evergreens that are nearby. And when the woods kind of open up, it leaves a little texture behind. So when the wind blows, the little leaves flutter. It's very lovely. It is super hardy. Some say it's hardy up to zones 3, but to be safe, I would say 3B to 9. So, and it has a very large native range. It is native to most of the eastern United States, extended into southern Ontario, southern Quebec, and Nova Scotia. And it is fairly drought tolerant, but it does appreciate a moist spot. And when you see it in its native range, you're often going to find it in the wetlands or the low-lying areas rather than on the slopes. And that helps you to tell it apart from some of the lookalikes that you might mistake it for. And the one that it's mistaken for most often is American hop hornbeam, it's horrible. It's got such a confusingly same name, and also it shares the common name of ironwood with the American hornbeam. So that
ironwood and musclewood. It's like a WWE wrestling match going on in the woods.
Turns out, though, that there are dozens of plants all over the world that have the name of ironwood because they have this really strong, sturdy wood that can be used to make tools. I don't know, but I'm not going to make tools out of this one. I just like to look at it. It likes to have its feet in the water, but like I said, it is fairly drought tolerant. The American hop hornbeam, and the botanical name of that one is Austria virginiana. So at least it has a very different sounding botanical name. You're going to find that one more on the upland slopes and drier areas. And the other way you can tell it apart from the American hop hornbeam is the bark. It's got that smooth, muscly bark. Ugh, that kind of gives me the creeps. But anyway, and American hop hornbeam has shaggy bark that sort of looks like tiny little strips of shaggy, paper that are hanging off. So if you're looking at something and wondering which of these two it is, look at the bark, and that's a good way to tell it apart. And if you want to tell it apart from European hornbeam, which is much less likely to show up sort of randomly in your woodlands, but if you see something you think, oh, this might be a hornbeam, wait until it flowers. And the European hornbeam has a flower that looks very much like a hop. So it has, like little almost petals that are around the fruit. Whereas the American hornbeam has more of a shaggy looking bract that's got 3 lobes on it. So that was the final detail that helped me ID this. This little tree finally flowered last summer, and I got out my binoculars and I looked at it. And I said, okay, I think we've got a positive idea on this one. So this is one that I didn't know what it was, but I knew I liked it.
I love that. This is the most ironic of ironics, because a lot of times you would think that, dear listeners, that we choose the same plant. I don't think have ever come across that before, where we choose the same plant or we see each other's lists and have to reconfigure things. That has happened maybe once, if ever. I don't know, Carol, but I almost picked Musselwood, and I was running around looking in the woods, doing the edge of my gardens and everything. And I instead, for my next plant, I decided to shake it up a little bit. I'm going to go with one I wasn't going to. I picked Moosewood, which is growing right next to the Musselwood in my woodland area that backs up to my long border. And So I will say, again, a very distinctive bark, a bark that you notice almost immediately. And these trees are growing next to each other on my property. So moosewood goes by so many common names as well, but it's Acer pennsylvanicum. It is native to the northeastern US and southeast Canada. It's zones 3 to 7. It also goes by, all right, brace yourself here, striped maple, snakebark maple, goosefoot maple. I personally loved moosewood the best, and I'm going to go with moosewood. And the reason that it's called moosewood is because in its more northerly regions where moose are very populous, the moose will eat the bark of this tree because it's kind of quirky. It's got some apparently good nutrition value to it. So that is why it is called moosewood. So if you're a gardener and you have this in your garden, you might need to do a little protective measures during the winter months and you have moose, then when the moose might be feasting on this. But, striped maple is probably a really good common name as well, because the bark of this tree, particularly and most acutely when it's young. So we're talking, a caliber of maybe 3 inches or so, up to about maybe 8 inches, has this striation of rust and bright green and a little bit of silver gray. And it's irregular all on the bark. And from afar, it's very eye-catching, especially during the winter when there's not much going on and, it's a sea of brown and maybe, a little bit of like dark gray. This moosewood really stands out. It's a pretty exceptional tree in its own right. It has a pretty beautiful, slightly wider than it is canopy. It's not a huge tree either, even at its maximum height. It's only 15 to 25 feet tall and wide, 15 to 25 feet tall, 12 to 20 feet wide. So, slightly taller than it is wide. It's perfect for woodland gardens. I actually saw when I was out west, someone had this as a specimen tree in their landscape, and it was very attractive. Not a lollipop tree. It gives you more of, kind of an amorphous canopy look to it, which appeals to me more than, something that looks like just a circle on a stick. But it's just a really, really cool tree. Now, when you're not appreciating its winter value, which is all about the bark and the stems being all those, crazy striped colors, the leaves do look like goose feet. For lack of a better word, they nailed it on this one. It is not a typical maple leaf with, the points and the stars. It has more of a lobed bottom and then kind of a webbed top to the leaf. And the leaves and the foliage turn a bright yellow in fall, which is really lovely. It also has these green pendulous flowers. So those, they're kind of insignificant until they turn into seed pods. And then you see these kind of winged green seed pods that are almost in chains. So really kind of gives you a little bit of something in every season. I'm a big fan of it. I've always been a big fan of this particular specimen that has, been there longer than I have self-seeded itself and has established itself right on the edge of one of my beds. And it's a beautiful backdrop, especially in winter. And it's making nice friends with its musclewood friend right next to it. So I really lucked out in that occasion. But like you said, I feel like either one of these native trees would be lovely, even in a more manicured situation in a bed or border, because, not a huge tree, but very attractive in several different seasons. So, Carol, we've talked about some trees. We talked about a native perennial. We talked about a very cool conifer. What is your third plant on your underappreciated for winter list?
So I've got a shrub for my next selection. And,
Carol, woodies, all the woodies. Holy cow.
I know, but they're great in winter, right? Yeah. I should have found more perennials. I should have, but this one is really good. So this is a plant that looks great year round, and especially in winter when nothing else is really going on. And that is little Heath pieris. So that's Pieris japonica, little Heath, and it is hardy from zones 5 to 9. The straight species is native to China, Japan, and Taiwan. I think we've had all natives up until this point in this episode.
We have,
so
yeah.
Our first non-native, but it's not invasive in any way. It's, a nice, polite little non-native plant. It grows 3 to 4 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. I have seen them bigger. The Don Wallace out there in California has one that's probably taller than I am, but it's a wonderful plant for year-round color. It's a broadleaf evergreen, and it is variegated. So the centers of the leaves are green, and then they're edged with white, and the new growth is pink. So Don Wallace pointed out that this is a plant that kind of looks like it's blooming year-round because that pink color really reads like flowers from a distance, which I thought was a cool thought. And of course, it does bloom in early spring. So in spring, you get those gorgeous little lily of the valley shaped bellflowers that are white. And generally, it really depends where you are, when it will bloom, but from early spring to sort of mid-spring, it puts out the flowers. And around that same time, you'll see a lot of new growth. So it's like very showy in spring. But it also gets that pink color back in the winter time. And so that is, again, sort of a floral look, if you will, in the winter with those pink tinged variegated leaves. Just lovely. It's deer proof, but it is a little bit particular about growing conditions. So what it really wants, this is a woodland plant in its native habitat. So it would really like to have moist, well-drained, woodsy soil. So a lot of humus in it, or compost, or bark mulch if you want to add that. And it prefers partial shade. You can give it a little sun, but don't overdo it. And especially the further south you are, it may tend to burn if you give it too much sun. But in dappled shade, or, someplace where it gets consistent light shade throughout the day, it will perform beautifully. And it just a lovely little plant that goes with pretty much everything. And what I think makes it underappreciated for winter is the colors. Like these colors, you just don't see very, very many pink plants in winter. So I thought that was important to include. Yeah.
And I think, so you had mentioned a couple of times Don Wallace. So this is Don Wallace, who is the owner and proprietor of Singing Tree Gardens in McKinley,
California. Yes.
California.
Yeah.
And when you said, like, I actually remember seeing this plant in his display gardens, and the texture is pretty incredible because everybody thinks, oh yeah, I know pieris, but because it's a tiny leaves, it almost looks like fluffy cotton candy from afar or something. It's like, it's one of those plants that you want to run over and kind of hug it a little bit, especially his, because it's that huge. But if folks want, Carol did an amazing article with Don Wallace and on his gardens. Talk about underappreciated for winter. You will never underappreciate plants again in winter when you take a look at that article that she did. Beautiful gardens, gorgeous winter color, almost on every single conifer and broadleaf evergreen. That's mostly what he has in his garden. So check that out online. Maybe we'll drop a link in the show notes for this podcast. Carol, I've now put you on the hot spot, but can you do that? Can you drop that in the show notes?
I will. I'll drop a link to that article in the show notes. And actually, the photo that you will see in the other photo that I put in the show notes came from Ontario. So when I was doing, and I'll drop a link to this one too. I did an article called "Make a Winter Color Wish List." And I went to 3 different places in Ontario, whistling gardens, not Singing Tree. That's the one in California. singing and whistling. But whistling gardens, I went to the Royal Botanical Rock Garden, which is amazing. And then I also went to the Toronto Botanic Garden. And honestly, I'm not really sure which of those three gardens that I took the photo that's in the show notes, but it's a much smaller plant than the one that Dawn has. So you'll be able to see both. If you go to our podcast tab on the website, and click on this show, you should be able to see photos of all these great plants that we're talking about.
Yeah, we always remind everybody, don't get into a car accident. You don't have to do that. We've got our plant lists online, so you can just go and look there instead, especially if you're driving in the snow. It's winter. Stop that. Don't do that. All right. I feel like I got to do a perennial. So I'm going to do a bergenia, which, yeah, I guess everybody thinks evergreen, perennial, bergenia. It isn't underappreciated. Let's put it that way. But it is not the first one that hops to mind, right? Like we think of hellebores, we think of maybe epimediums. We probably don't think of spotted wintergreen that I did earlier. So, but, bergenia is up there. But we had gotten as sample plants, actually, I believe, from Walter's Garden out in Michigan. We had gotten Peppermint Patty, which is a newer cultivar. I forget, last year, this year, 2 years ago, somewhere in that mix. So this guy has been established in my garden for a bit now. And when I did my walkabout the other morning looking for underappreciated winter interest, I thought, ooh, look at you. Don't you look great in the winter that I've never noticed before? It's zones 4 to 8. And I think what makes this bergenia pretty exceptional is that it is a big bergenia. These leaves, I got out the tape measure, were 9 inches long and about, I think that they came in at about 4 to 5 inches wide. So it is large. If you didn't know any better, you'd think it was a hosto when it's all green during the growing season. But right now, it is an evergreen perennial, but it's not green. It is a dark burgundy color, and it's pretty beautiful. It is reddish pink on some of the more juvenile leaves that were left, and then a dark, almost Merlot color on the larger leaves. And it's holding its own. I've got it planted underneath an Eastern redbud. I did water it in the first season to get it established because obviously being in the understory of a large tree like that, it was starved for water if I didn't get it established first. But it's doing quite well now, so it will tolerate drought once it's established. I really also love that these leaves are almost this rubbery consistency to them. They're very hardy, these leaves. So even though it kind of looks like a hosta, it definitely is not a plant that mushes out eventually. It really does hold its own throughout the winter. And the same is true for almost all the bergenias. I will, however, say, research has shown, I've seen that now there are some new cultivars of bergenias that are coming out that have ruffled edges to them. And if you look in the fine print, it looks to be every single one of those is not evergreen. So these go completely dormant. So be careful out there, folks, if you're shopping for some winter interest, some bergenias now are not going to be evergreen for those of us in colder zones. During the spring, you can expect sprays of these waxy pink flowers that are just, kind of a very basic look to them. They've got 4 petals and kind of a little bit of a throat that has some yellow to it. And they kind of come up almost like little candelabras at the top of this dense rosette of foliage. Peppermint Patty is going to get 22 inches tall and about 18 to 20 inches wide. So that is no shrinking violet. That is not your mama's bergenia that, stayed a polite 10 by 10 inches. This is a big guy. They're also deer and rabbit resistant. So I feel like we get letters on occasion from, hey, stop featuring all those hostas. They're deer food. Stop putting those in your magazine. So if you like the look of hostas, but you have a deer issue, you might want to try some bergenias instead. People often refer to this as pig squeak. I hate that common name so much. But if you take that rubbery leaf and you rub it between your fingers, it does make a horrifying squeaking noise. that apparently resembles a pig, but it also, the foliage is kind of that rubbery, waxy, rounded foliage, and it resembles pig ears, apparently. I don't know. I don't come up with these things. I'm just going to say bergenia or bergenia, some people say as well. But peppermint patty is an exceptional one just because it's big, it's beefy, it's very bulky, and it turns this glorious red pink color in winter. And it's my new appreciated winter perennial. All right, Carol, bring it on home with that last plant.
All right. So when I think of winter interest, I think of the tall things. I think of things that will be up above the snow and, big trees and grasses and that kind of thing. But we really don't reliably get snow in our part of Southern
Not
Connecticut.
anymore.
Not really. Like I've seen pictures from the Facebook that apparently we do generally get snow this time of year, but it's been a few years since we've got, enough snow that sticks around. So I was thinking that for an underappreciated plant for winter interest, I should include something little that sort of hugs the ground. So I think St. Mary's broom, blue spruce, is a very, very cool miniature dwarf conifer. That's Picea pungens St. Mary's broom, and it is hardy from zones 2 to 7. So no matter where you are, I think this could be a container plant, or you can tuck it into a bed or border or whatever, and it's going to stay nice and small. So the maximum size that it can achieve over decades is like 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. But for the first many years, it's going to be about 1 foot tall, 2 feet wide. But I think the cool thing about it is that the needles and the little, gosh, I don't know what you call it, but the little branchy, stubs, that they are sort of the full size that you would expect on a full grown blue spruce. So I feel like it has a really cool texture, and it has got gorgeous color. It is a silvery blue, especially when in the spring when new growth is still emerging, but it holds that silvery blue throughout the year, and including in winter when a lot of blue spruces will get a little darker, more green, it's still blue. So from a distance, this little thing looks like a little drift of snow almost, a little drift of silvery blue snow, just lovely. And I don't know, it won't develop a strong leader at all. It'll stay nice and bun shaped. So if you have a smaller space, again, if you're growing in containers, or if you're just putting it near a path or somewhere where you don't want it to get big and take over, this is a great little choice. Yeah. So I don't know much more to say about it. I don't think it makes cones. I don't really think it has wildlife value, but it is descended, or, it's a selection from a native species, and it grows very well sort of in the northern half of North America, not so much in the South. Like, most blue spruces really don't want to be in the hot, humid Southeast or in the hot, dry Southwest unless, I think actually Colorado spruce comes from the Southwest. So I take that back. I think it's fine out there.
Not hot, right. Not humid. Doesn't want that. Wants more, cool, arid, sharply draining soil, that sort of thing.
Yeah. High elevations. If you're out west, it'll probably do better than in like the hot like desert valleys. But it's a cool, polite trial sized conifer that almost anybody could fit into their landscape.
Yeah, I just always think of blue spruce. It used to be, I would insist on for my Christmas tree a blue spruce. And it is the most prickly of the conifers that you can ever possibly imagine. So I will say handle with care when planting. But the added bonus of that is that it doesn't get browsed upon that much because it is extremely prickly and good looking. So if you want a conifer that isn't going to get decimated in winter, pick Carol's blue spruce. So, all right, well, I'll throw a bone out there to the Southeast listeners out here. And I came up with a plant that is a little bit more into the warmer zone. So this is a native Southeastern plant. It's a selection, it's a native art, and it's Rejoice drooping laurel, which is Leucothoe axillaris Rejoice, and it is zone 6 to 9. I love Leucothoe. I really do. I think the only one that's a bummer for me is any of the variegated Leucothoes. They just don't do well for me. They tend to burn out. But, the standard straight species, Leucothoe fontanacea, that's such a beautiful plant. It's a broadleaf evergreen, keeps its shape and its color as almost this weeping shrub year round, has those beautiful pendulous urn-shaped lily of the valley flowers in spring. And, I think standard Leucothoe, which is Leucothoe fontanacea, gets a little bit of a tinge of red. Our former offices, we had a beautiful specimen that was right outside our side door that we would see as we went into the fine gardening offices. Every winter, it just was a beautiful plant. But this Rejoice, which is a newer cultivar that was introduced by Plants Nouveau a few years ago, my goodness, in winter. Now I've seen actual footage of this plant, so I know that it hasn't been photoshopped. It is a dark purple, like an emperor's coat purple, just gorgeous, gorgeous eggplant purple. And that's the color that it transitions to in winter. It's 2 to 3 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. So it's a little bit smaller for a Leucothoe, which tend to get a little bit bigger. Again, same shape though, long arching branches with these smooth lance-like leaves that are, I believe they're opposite all along those branches. A little bit of a sheen to it as well, which is really beautiful. In spring, the new growth pushes out to replace some of the old evergreen foliage, and the spring new growth is kind of a bright red. I almost was going to say it looks like the record button on our podcast right now, but it is a bright red color, and it also then fades as we get into the summer months to this dark green. You get those spring flowers, which is great. So it's really giving you something in every single season. And then get a few frosts and this puppy transitions to that dark purple color. And that's what you'll see in the show notes, is that darker purple. It's great in partial to full shade. I think that's important too. So many of us now are looking for, broadleaf evergreens that are, not a rhododendron and are not a boxwood because of all the boxwood blight issues that we've got going on right now. So I think Leucothoe is poised to make a resurgence to really solve for some of those, shade to partial shade, foundation, backdrop, bone type plants. And this Rejoice would be a perfect choice for that. Rejoice would be a perfect choice. I love that one of the common names of Leucothoe, aside from drooping laurel, which I think is the one that most people use, is dog hobble. And I had to go down the rabbit hole. I did last night. I'm like, why the heck is this thing called dog hobble? And apparently because Leucothoe has a tendency to form kind of a mass, a thicket, if you will. And a lot of times some of the branches will root through their own layering, especially the straight species, maybe not necessarily some of these choice cultivars. And it would trip up hunting dogs. So hunters really hate this plant in its native range down in the southeast because it would basically maim these hunting dogs and hobble them up, and they'd go shooting through these thickets and really whack their paws and whack their legs and would be hobbled for the rest of the hunting season. So I thought, oh man, that's great. I love these stories. I would say even if you have a dog, which I do, I am going to be planting Rejoice drooping laurel because its winter color is truly spectacular, and I think it's worth it. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about things that he thinks are underappreciated.
Happy New Year, Danielle, Carol, and all you listeners. It was a warm and wonderful holiday for the Chapman family. We laughed, we cried, we played board games that I became a bit too competitive over. In short, it was everything the holidays should be. But on to things that are underappreciated in winter. I'm going to give you one that will change your world forever. January vacations. Yes, that's right. For years, my wife and I have boarded a plane, train, or automobile in the week after the Christmas to New Year break. And let me tell you, my friends, it is glorious. None of those crushing crowds of harried travellers clutching packages tied up with strings. None of the exorbitant ticket pricing that one sees when booking a flight during the actual 2-week holiday window. Oh, no. No, my dear ones, this English gentleman waits until all that ridiculous nonsense is over and done. And when the sadness of empty houses and needleless Christmas trees starts to set in, whammo, I reach for my suitcase and hit the open road. This has been a Chapman tradition for years now, and it's truly an underrated activity in winter. You see, everyone travels during the holidays, but not many travel during that time immediately following the holidays. Doing so truly helps chase away a case of early onset winter blues. This year, my bride and I are heading to Savannah, Georgia. It's not exceptionally warm there this time of year, but it's certainly milder than jolly old Connecticut. We plan to tour some historic houses, eat our weight in cheesy grits, and soak in as much southern hospitality as possible. So with that in mind, you'll have to forgive me for cutting this monologue short. The car is warming in the driveway and the bags are all loaded. All that's left is for me to file this audio postcard with the podcast producer, and I hope that it is appreciated as much as a red twig dogwood in winter. Ta-ta!
Oh, it's so good to hear Peter's voice again. That really helped, chase away my winter blues.
Yes, it's good to have Peter to ring in the new year with us, even though it's, a little bit into the new year.
Exactly. Hey, we're giving you all the accents in this episode because we had Peter, because everything sounds better with a British accent. And now let's go down south, and we're going to hear a southern gentleman tell us about his favorite winter underappreciated plants. All right, so I'm very excited because we have one of my favorite garden designers that has agreed to come onto the podcast today to talk about underappreciated winter interests. And I thought we'd go down south. So, expert guest, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Jay Sifford. I am a landscape designer based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I garden here in zone, well, it was 8A. I guess now it's 8B. And then up in the mountains of Western North Carolina at 3,300 feet, which is considerably cooler summer and winter.
Oh, but it's the most beautiful spot in the world, Jay. It really is. Thank you so much for being here. Y'all, I got to visit Jay's garden, 2 years ago, your mountain garden in West Jefferson. And if you were a fan of, which I know a lot of you were from emails, the Modern Meadow article that we did, that was all Jay's design. And more to come from Jay Sifford in fine gardening in 2024 and in 2025. So stay tuned on that. But Jay, thank you for joining us. And I will say, you gave me a preview of the plants that you wanted to talk about for underappreciated winter interest. And one photo in particular captivated me. It was of a blue conifer of some kind surrounded by basically dead grass or dormant grass, which doesn't sound beautiful, but it is stunning.
I think that ornamental grasses are underappreciated, but when people do appreciate them, they usually appreciate them in the summer when they're in flower, not so much in the winter. But I find that the tan and brown grasses, even when they're dormant, look really great with blue foliage. So if you have, depending on what part of the country you live in, I'm sure you can find some blue needled conifers that will work to kind of recreate this if it's something that you like. So this is a Abies concolor blue cloak. It's a white fir, and it's a great tree. Doesn't get too large, but it looks really great in front of the ornamental grasses. And the reason I think that ornamental grasses are great even in the winter is because they have a lot of texture. and they have kinetic movement. I'm all about magic and choreography in the garden. And I think that when the winter winds blow, which typically are stronger than the summer winds, unless you're having a tornado, maybe, but
Oh no, not that.
hopefully you won't. But just the movement of them is really special and sort of mesmerizing, I think. And thirdly, they do tend to give a place for songbirds, beneficial pollinator insects, things like that to hide. And sometimes you'll even find little birds' nests down in there someplace. So they do a lot of things year round. But again, in the winter, they really show off the conifers. So if you have a blue needled conifer, or you don't, if you want to go get one, and you have some ornamental grass, it's a great combination. So that is Carly Rose pennisetum, or fountain grass. It works really well with that in this scenario. Calamagrostis, or feathery grass, you probably know Carl Forster's the most popular one of those, works great because it's very vertical. And panicum, or switchgrass, works really well also.
It's a stunning combination. And, for those who, maybe the white fir isn't their cup of tea, any of the blue spruces, I can imagine, work really well in this application too. It is just it's so stunning. I mean, if you told somebody like brown and blue, I don't know that they would think that that was that beautiful, but listeners, definitely go to the podcast page on finegardening.com, hit that tab on the podcast. You can see this gorgeous picture that Jay has submitted from his garden, and you'll find all the plant lists and plant information from this episode there too.
Yeah. I think I first learned about brown and blue together years ago. I was at Restoration Hardware, and there was a whole thing with powder blue and actually chocolate brown. And I thought, that looks really good together. And so I think it works just as well with the powder blue and the tan. And if you live in the South and can't grow Aves concolor, you could do Arizona cypress, you could do blue Atlas cedar, or even some of the blue arrow junipers would work as well. So you have a lot of choices depending on where you live.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. All right. Sticking with our conifer theme, the next photo and plant that you had sent me as a potential just lit up my world, literally. I thought it was a particular conifer that it was not, because it had a cute name named Louie. Who is Louie?
Louie is a Pinus strobus, or white pine, so eastern white pine. So it's a native to the eastern part of the United States. It's good zones 3 through 8A probably. Doesn't get too big like some of the white pines get really tall. It gets to maybe 20 feet tall, 15 feet wide or so. And during the warmer months, it's just kind of a really pretty bright green. But then when the temperatures start to dip, it turns this beautiful orange, kind of a yellow, golden yellow, I guess you'd say. And if the tree's planted in full sun, that color will be accentuated. If it's planted in part shade, which it'll grow fine in part shade, but the color just won't be exactly what you probably want. And if you look at the interior of that tree, you'll find that it's kind of a bright green on the inside. So that again shows me that full sun is best for producing that color that you'd want.
It really does give me total 80s frosted tips kind of effect to it. It really does. I was channeling some of my relatives who may or may not still do frosted tips on their hair and channel the 80s. I loved it. It is a shockingly beautiful color, and something that I'm not used to with a white pine, that blue green color, sometimes a little bit of like white striping or variegation sometimes on that long needle, but not gorgeous yellow. I mean, that's beautiful. It is stunning. How big does this get?
Maybe 20 feet tall, 12 to
Okay.
15 feet wide.
Okay.
And it is easier. You were talking earlier about Chief Joseph, I think, lodgepole pine.
Yes,
And
I
this
was.
tree I find is easier to grow. And easy's good.
It is.
The world's
It
so
is.
complex. Anytime I can do easy, I'm like, go with easy.
I like that too. And especially conifers, they're an investment. This, trees in general are an investment with a capital I, but conifers in particular can be pricey. So yeah, when you go down the route, I will say I have gone down the Chief Joseph route, and I've killed it.
I killed one too.
I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to admit it. And it's such a bummer. One, because I wanted that beautiful color, but two, wow, that's like a hole in my pocket just draining out. So I'm gonna have to give Louie a try
The
instead.
good thing about Louis too is he probably grows 12 inches a year. So if you're on a budget, you can get a smaller one and give him a year or two to get established, but then he'll grow really well. And then the other thing I want to say about that is, a lot of the conifers get a different cast or color to the foliage in the winter. So it's not just that, but a lot of the junipers do. Some of the cryptomerias do. Some of the chamaecyparis do. So don't discount dark green trees thinking that they'll be the same all year round, because that's not necessarily the case.
That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. Right now, my junipers are putting on a show, and I know people feel some kind of way about junipers more often than not, but my Dobbs frosted juniper right now is bright pink on the tips. It's
I think
unbelievable.
people think of when they used to play kick the can or hide and seek when they were kids, and they climbed under an old fashioned Hollywood juniper, and then they itched for 3 days after. But I'll just
Yeah.
say junipers are awesome. They're easy. They're not too expensive. They're low maintenance, drought tolerant. So get that old fashioned idea out of your head, because the newer junipers are kinder and gentler.
I love that. A kinder, gentler juniper. We need that shirt, Jay. We do. All right. So getting out of the realm of conifers, you sent me a viburnum that I was not familiar with, probably because it's not exactly hardy for those of us in colder zones, but this is an evergreen viburnum, correct?
Right. It's a Mediterranean origin. It's viburnum tinus, shades of pink, and it it is evergreen, dark green during most of the summer. It'll take on a reddish cast to the leaves, usually in the fall, and then the stems um, tend to be sort of a brighter red, or maybe a blood red, kind of like a
Oh,
twig dogwood, I guess you'd say.
oh
But the great
gosh.
thing about this plant, if you live in zone 7A or south, which is where it's going to grow, is that it starts to bloom like this time of year, so January, and the buds are really tight in, and they kind of, I think the inflorescence looks a little bit like a Queen Anne's lace. It's kind of that umbral
Oh,
type thing. And the buds, when they're tight, are really bright, bright pink, hence the name. And when they open, they're a little bit more of a blush, lighter pink color. The shrub gets to 4 to 5 feet, so not really big, and you can make a hedge out of it if you want to. It's salt tolerant, it's drought tolerant. The deer don't eat it. It's almost the perfect thing if you live in zone 7A or warmer.
sounds like a great alternative for a foundation planting too, to a boxwood, say.
Right. If your windows are not real low to the ground, but up a little bit, you can certainly use that. That way you don't have to just saw it off when it gets too big, like a lot of people do down here with the Autolucan laurels and that sort of thing. It's a
Yeah.
bad look. No tree wants to look like that.
No, no, no. Crimes against botany right there. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. I love the texture on this leaf too. It's not smooth like a rhododendron. It definitely has some very pronounced leaf margins to it that almost give it kind of a crinkly or, very rhino hidey type look.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
Love it. Love it. All right. So you gave me a plant that I can't grow, but I can drool over by just looking at on the screen here. But you also gave me a native plant that is very native in my neck of the woods and just brought me great joy. It really, the heartstrings were singing when I saw this photo come up. And what native plant did you decide to end your list with?
Well, that's great. It's Hemamelis virginiana, or the Native American witch hazel.
Mhm.
So when we think about witch hazels, we generally think of the Asian hybrids like Jelena and Diana and Arnold's Promise. But this one is native. It gets to 15 to 20 feet tall and wide, so you need to have a little bit of space for it. And like the Asian hybrid witch hazels, the flowers are held close to the stem and kind of have that confetti look, which is very cool and festive. It kind of makes you happy when you look at it. And it does bloom for me in my 6B mountain garden. It starts in November and goes, into December.
Wow.
almost up to the new year. So it's just a nice thing to have. And I love the shape of witch hazels. They're very sculptural, almost like a Japanese maple would be, but a little bit more open and upright than most of the Japanese maples. But I found out an interesting fact, and that is that the Native Americans actually used this for a divining rod to find water, because the branches, were split kind of Y-shaped. So it worked out well. And since they typically grow in moist soil, they're always looking for water. So why not make a divining rod out of it?
That
You should try it
amazing.
this weekend.
I will go out there, I will saw off a branch, and I will start wandering around. I mean, we've had a very, very wet winter so far, so I don't think we'll have a hard time finding it. I'm not sure I need the stick to find the water at this point. And speaking of the branches, like kind of a beautiful silvery sheen to that bark and those branches on the American witch hazel too, right, Jay?
Right. And the foliage in the fall turns really pretty yellow, sometimes yellow and brown mix, just depending on the fall. But if you can get 2 or 3 seasons out of a plant, to me, that's the way to go. I very rarely plant something that I get a pop of 2 weeks of color, like my peonies. You want to go out and pitch a tent and sleep with them for the week and a half or 2 weeks they're in bloom. But especially in smaller gardens, which more and more people are having these days, it's just good to have something with multi-season interest, and this plant definitely does that.
I love that. And that's such a good way to encompass this topic too that we're talking about, winter interest, well, underappreciated winter interest. But, every single one of the plants that you named doesn't just look good in winter. It has these multi-seasons of interest too. So, I mean, the only thing that I'm upset about is you put a few more plants on my shopping list for spring and I'm going to go broke.
Well, what better way to spend your money, right? If it
Right.
brings you joy, why not?
I love it. Jay, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I hope you'll come back again for another new topic.
I'd love to anytime, Dee. Thank you.
Well, that was super fun because I was thinking, oh, okay, we're going to go down south. They don't need winter interest. Like, nothing's that crazy. But Jay Sifford has such a great perspective because he's got, a garden up in the mountains now and a garden down in a more southerly location in North Carolina. So he really does need winter interest.
And they do have winter. It's just different than our winter, right?
It's just different. Well, actually, it's becoming very similar, our winter is. But hey, Carol, this is ironic because we're taping this and we're about to get a snowstorm at the end of the week. So happy winter to you.
Hey, happy winter to you.
All right. See you next time.